Discover Next, the studio for facades and design. Next is the platform for innovation in the field of building envelopes, for inspiration, information and communication. Initiated by Vicona, with leading industry experts as Next partners. Next is a unique concept which is constantly evolving and bringing the future of cities to life.
Hello and a warm welcome here to the 8th edition of our International Next Facade Summit. My name is Christian Mettlach from Vicona, and I have the pleasure to guide you through this event. You just saw it a couple seconds ago, a little promotion video from the Next studio. Where are we broadcasting? We are broadcasting here from Frankfurt. We established the Next studio 7.5 years ago. It's run and managed by Vicona together with 12 Next partners. And the success factor, that's pretty easy. It's a place or a platform for communication, inspiration and information. The networking, that's difficult when we do a live stream. We have an audience here in Frankfurt. You're allowed to make some noise now. Hey! Thank you very much. And it's of course always a big challenge how many people are joining live from the offices all around the world. We have registered participants from India, South Africa, all over Europe, of course. So I think that's still fascinating, even after COVID, to reach such a big international and almost global audience. The International Next Facade Summit, that's the 8th edition, I already mentioned this. We are always inviting 4 speakers from very well-known architectural offices. And it's always a great pleasure to have these guys here, showcasing their landmarks, their biggest or their most important projects. So we managed again to have 4 really outstanding speakers here. This time, we're gonna have Christian Bergmann from Hadi Teherani. He managed to come from Hamburg, managed because it was a long way today. We have Lars Ostenfeld Riemann from Ramboll, coming from Copenhagen, almost on time, almost. We have Sander Troost from GMP Architects. The headquarters is based in Hamburg. Sander is coming from Berlin. And last but not least, we have Juergen Heinzel. He's coming from Amsterdam, from UN Studio. That is our setup for today. We have a slight switch in the order because Christian was the late arrival, so he will join as the last speaker. And we start with Lars. Lars, you want to already come on stage and I introduce you. Ramboll is an international engineering or global engineering company. I was honestly impressed to hear that close to 20,000 people are working for your company. You are based in Copenhagen. Ramboll is active, among other fields, in the field of traffic, energy, come on, help me.
Buildings.
Buildings, that's a good topic.
Water.
And most of all, you're coming out with a unique approach, stop demolishing buildings, start to transform buildings. And I think you have 2 or 3 outstanding projects you want to introduce today. So the basic message is stop tearing down buildings, start to transform buildings. Lars, the stage is yours.
Thank you. Yes, so I have 25 years of experience in designing buildings, and most of my career it's been about new buildings, and it's been about all kinds of structures, also bridges, tunnels, and so on. Not that I've personally been involved in all of that, but this is what me and my colleagues are doing around the world. So lots of exciting projects. Here you can see a map of our offices. So we are basically on all continents, but mainly obviously in Europe. This is our home market with the headquarters in Copenhagen. And we do, as Christian was mentioning, buildings, infrastructure projects, environmental projects, energy, water, and so on. The company is 80 years old next year. It was founded just after the Second World War by these two guys who were professors at the Technical University of Denmark. And they carried a very strong set of values that has been the DNA of the company ever since. So even today, we use the same values in our work. It's the foundation of the company. And the way that they have evolved, they now are all about the sustainability agenda. So when we talk about our company and the DNA of our company, we use different words than we used 80 years ago, but it is nevertheless the same high standards and high ethical principles we operate by. Our strategy, as is visualized here, goes back to our mission and our vision and our values. And our strategy, again, is focusing a lot on how do we build a better future, a better world. This was also the question in 1945, and this is the question today. So I have called my presentation Respect, Review, Renew, and it addresses some of the issues that we have in front of us. First of all, we know that the buildings sector represent about 40% of the climate change impact. So that's both the operational part and the embodied carbon part. We know that a large part of our existing building stock is at risk of becoming stranded assets. And that's because there are new energy requirements. So if you are investing in a building that doesn't meet the new requirements, you can see that it might not be worth a lot in a few years. So that's why it's a stranded asset. We also see that after COVID, there has been a lack of demand of new office space. So people are working more from home, and in some parts of the world, in New York City, for example, more than 20% of office space is vacant. So what do you do with all this vacant space? And finally, we see that actually in most of the world, and especially in the western part of the world, population is declining. So that also means that we should consider, how many new buildings do we actually need in the long run. And just to visualize this, I have this. Now we are in Germany today, and this is the prediction of the German population. So it goes from 85 million people today to about 70 million people by the end of the century, which I guess is not a bad thing for the planet that we get a little bit fewer, but from a buildings perspective, it changes the whole dynamics of the market. So rather than being on a upward going curve where we have to build a lot, so after Second World War, you can see, we had periods of a lot of, boom. We now see a future with maybe less new construction, but obviously the buildings we already have has to be renewed constantly and modernized with new technology. So I've brought you today 2 examples of the type of projects that we are doing. We are trying to advise our clients not to demolish buildings, even if they are redundant. We are trying to challenge them and come up with new ideas to how they can preserve the buildings. And so both of these buildings are office buildings. They are not very old, so surprisingly new. So this is a building in Copenhagen. It has a high-rise component and a podium component. It's built in 2001, so 2001, and it was designed by Henning Larsen. It still looks very new and very modern, but there are certain problems with it. The tenant is a Ferring is a medical or pharmaceutical company. They just moved out after having stayed there for 20 years because, you know, living in a tower, you know, one company, it actually cut the organization into small groups that never talked to each other. So they wanted to move to a building where everybody could, you know, be more in contact, and so they had a new building design for them, and which is a shame because this building, you know, is only 20 years old. The other thing is the building is also using a lot of energy, so it doesn't meet current standards, and so we were hired to analyze both these problems and come up with ideas on how to what to do about it. So first of all, we looked at the office plate, so the plan of the floor plan of each floor, and we analyzed, you know, how can you solve the problem of communication between the floors. So we opened up, you know, between the floors and allowed for people to walk in a staircase, not only in a lift, but walk between the floors in staircases. And that already gave a whole new dynamic to the space. We modernized all the surfaces, and yeah, so after 20 years, a building will be a little bit worn down. But then the other thing is the energy consumption. How do you do that? How do you track the carbon and make sure that you are on a net zero curve towards zero carbon? And the thing here is that basically you need the data. You need to understand how does energy, you know, where does energy go in the building? We had, because it's a relatively new building, we had all the data 20 years back. We harvested. I wondered how to show that because there's a lot of data, and we actually applied a lot of analysis. We had hundreds of things that we could do based on the data that we could do to save energy, and you know, we visualized all of these different energy consumers in the building, and at the end we came up with a few highlights. You know, these are the things that you can do to save energy and that can be also financially viable, which presented the different options to the clients. And at the end, we came up with a plan to, as you can see here, to reduce the energy consumption by 1/3, so 70% rather than 100%. And we also showed to the clients how they can minimize the CO2 emissions from the energy that is being spent to stay below the CREM curve and make sure that the building is not going to be a stranded asset. Because, you know, a stranded asset is when the building is not meeting regulation, and so you won't be able to sell it, or sometimes you won't be able to rent it out to companies that have committed to, for example, science-based targets. So this is a very important way to keep a building on the market and keep the value of the building. And again, it was a viable, so it was, you know, paying off with these investments. The other project I want to talk about is in London. Again, it's a building. It's called 8 Canada Square. It's a building from 2001, designed by Foster and Partners at the time. And the problem here again, HSBC moved out, or will move out of the building. They've been there for 20 years, but again, they found the building to not meet modern requirements. They wanted to move to a new building. They also took some of their staff from London to Birmingham. And so what do you do when you have a building that seemingly is old-fashioned? Well, we were hired by clients to do different things. First of all, we looked at the, what can you do to make sure the building meets the minimum energy efficiency standards that is applied for buildings in London. At the time, there was also a requirement to meet certain energy efficiency standards. So if you have an office building you want to rent out in London, you have to meet standard C in, I believe it's 2028, and then B in 2030. Otherwise, you are not allowed to rent it out. The other thing we did was, after having defined a brief, the client went out in an architecture competition, invited architects to come up with proposals to what can we do with this building. And we were then technical support, advised the client. And then when the architect was selected, the winner was selected, KPF Architects, and they came up with concepts. We supported the architect and developed the RIBA Stage 1 report. The basic vision here was, there are hundreds of these buildings around the world, in New York, first of all, but in all major cities. How can you transform these 20, 30, 40-year-old buildings into new, attractive assets? What is the blueprint of a sustainable transformation? And so our ambition obviously was, I think you've all seen this curve before, this diagram where you go from having conventional ways of building to going green, going sustainable, then restorative or regenerative. So how can we move these buildings as much as possible towards not only sustainable operations, but also regenerative operations? And so that was the challenge, and we set targets. First of all, very ambitious targets on many of these goals to improve from what it was before. We went through all of the things that you can imagine, analyzed them. How can you achieve best practice energy intensity targets? And then we took a look at also the existing infrastructure. And the question here is, of course, how much can you keep? How much has a lifetime for another 20 years? And how much do you need to replace? And all of that was then combined into a report and a concept. And so, for example, the facades, now we're talking about facades, we found out that we can keep the frames, but the glass panes, we need to change to improve energy efficiency. But we don't have to change the frames. The frames can last for many decades more, and it would be too costly also from a CO2 perspective to change that. So in the end, a lot of things we will be keeping, a lot of the mechanical, electrical systems we will keep, which is why one of the options we investigated to turn it all into housing was not selected, because that would mean that everything needed to be replaced except the structure. But we maintained a lot of it as offices, and then just going back, the top part here then turned into a hotel, so it's a mixed use. And we introduced these terraces so that people can go outside rather than stay inside a glass building the whole day. So they can go outside more easily. Prolong the lifetime of existing buildings and make sure that we don't have to demolish and build new because that's have a too big impact on the climate. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. What I think is special that we now have phrases and words which doesn't exist before, at least not in this content. Stranded asset, transforming buildings. I think 3, 4, 5 years ago, everybody was keen on building new buildings, and now we are talking about transforming buildings. What would you say the percentage in your building sector of Ramboll? I assume it is increasing, but it is a serious number now already, or you think, so where's the end of the road?
So it depends a little bit on the markets, but there's definitely a lot more renovation and refurbishment at the moment than there was a few years ago. And I think everybody's considering maintaining buildings. And I think the most radical example or extreme is in London. So we've seen lots of new opportunities in London in the last year. And I think maybe 80 to 90% of those projects that come out for tender are renovation projects. Only a few new buildings comes out here and there. Obviously, we still need new buildings. I think we need new buildings once in a while because population change and the need of a society change. But there's so much we can do with existing buildings.
But would you say after transforming a building, you already have a new building, or you talk about a real new building, a new building? So what is this kind of building for you? Is it a new building, or is it just a transformed building?
I would say this is actually a new building.
Okay.
And it can be renewed many times through the next century. So there's no way that this will not, I mean, this will be here in 100 years, I'm sure.
Okay.
But it might be that the next time you renew it, you take out all the ducts and electrical systems and then you put in new ones. But it will be here. And it's quite a challenge, so it's much harder to design a new building where there is already an old building.
An existing one,
than to design a new building because there's so many constraints.
Constraints. But imagine this building is just 20 years old. Honestly, how crazy is this? That you now have to think about transforming a building which is only 20 years old,
Which is why we also, when we do new buildings, we are thinking about flexibility and modularity and change of use. So how can we design a building today? Maybe it's a residential building when we build it, but it might be in 20 years we need to turn it into an office building if the population is less and maybe there's office space needed at the time.
So see you in 20 years again. Thank you very much, Lars. So, Sven, time to change the slides. And Sander Troost, coming from GMP, Gerkan Mark & Partner, headquarter in Hamburg. We have a Hamburg evening today, but you are based in Berlin.
Yes, sir.
Moving to Berlin 8 years ago, before you were in Brazil, and you are now talking about the fun part, you talk about sports. That is very interesting. You saw it on the invitation for this summit. We have the San Bernabeu Stadium. This is our visual highlight for the invitation. And Sander was the guy who was creating, transforming again. He was working for the World Cup 2014. You were working for the Olympics, both in Brazil. Yes. You were working for Qatar.
Yes.
And now you're working for the World Cup in the US, Canada and Mexico?
We're working on a stadium, but it will not be used for this World Cup.
Okay. But then you're focusing on the next World Championship?
Yes.
Which is most probably Saudi Arabia. Surprise, surprise. So, one sentence to the San Bernabeu Stadium, because it's a project which took him almost 10 years. And it was transformed in a process where the guys were still playing soccer. So I think that's a serious challenge to transform a landmark of the San Bernabeu Stadium and now have a huge, big, fancy stadium. And I think it is now a year old, isn't it?
they started playing almost 2 years ago.
Okay.
It's not officially opened yet.
Aha,
We're waiting
okay.
for the official.
So we're waiting for the party.
But,
Yeah,
yes,
okay.
exactly.
Sander, it's your stage. Yeah.
Thank you very much. So thank you first of all for inviting me here. Thank you all for being here as well, and also for everybody who is listening to us online. So my name is Sander Troost. I'm associate partner at GMP Architects in Berlin. And just a very brief introduction. This was the first project the firm did, founded by Volker Mark and Meinhard von Goerkan in 1965. This is Tegel Airport in Berlin. They won this competition straight out of university. Since then, we've had the pleasure to work on many projects all over the world, as well here in Frankfurt. You might know the APIR here in Frankfurt Airport. Or for the other Frankfurt football fans here, Frankfurt Stadium was also a renovation completely done for the World Cup in 2006. This is Dresden Kulturpalast, also a big renovation project that we did recently. And another of landmarks, which is also a very proud project, is the Leipzig Messe. And in Hamburg, we just inaugurated the second terminal for the U-Bahn in Elb Chaussee. We work all over the world. We have some offices in China as well. This is China National Museum. And this is 2 high-rise towers we did in Guangzhou. And another office we have is in Vietnam. This is Vietnam National Museum. Just as a brief introduction to what we do. We are now over 550 employees with 50 nationalities spread over 7 offices. And we've had the pleasure to have now 500 of the projects actually built. Today I'm not going to explain more other types of projects. I've been involved in sports architecture now for almost 15 years. This is a selection of the stadiums that we've been doing. And just to run you through a little bit, my passion and what I find so fascinating about stadiums is that they combine many different things. So it's about personal memories of people that once when they were kids went to see a match, but also a history of a culture, a history of a nation. And for German football fans, this is a very nice stadium. This was the complete renovation we did for Belo Horizonte Stadium for the World Cup in 2014. Football fans, German football fans will remember, this is where Germany beat Brazil, the host country, 7-1. And for everybody who is here listening to me that are from Brazil, I'm very sorry for showing this slide to you. But stadiums are also representing the ambitions and the spirit and the status of the clubs which they are in. And this is the trophy chamber for Real Madrid, with in the center part proudly standing the designer of the redesign that we did for Bernabeu Stadium. So our surprise when we walked into this room was, of course, very big, and it's a very great honor to be there, to represent through the design of the stadiums the status of the club. It's built for them. Of course, stadiums are also places of gathering, not only sports, but also cultural gathering. This is a Nadal festival in Mongolia, in the National Stadium, but also religious conventions. There are many different types of events that this very specific typology, this very unique type of building can host. And they can be very transformative for the neighborhoods, even sometimes for the cities they're in. This is the design we did for the Brasilia National Stadium also in 2014. And the impact that it can bring, a positive impact to cities, to city development, is massive and transformative. But the most fascinating part for me as architect is to see how a single building can transform tens of thousands of individuals into one massive collective emotion. And usually 2, if you have 2 teams playing. And we can, as architects, we can steer this, we can guide this, we can design this to a certain extent, not based only on the physical architecture, let's say, the stands, the sidelines, all the services that are there, but also with the light design, the sound design, making stadiums really intensive. And the German word, I love this, is Hexenkessel. So this is an architectural decision that is taken in the very beginning, of course, together with clients. But this is fascinating that as architects we can be part, we can almost orchestrate this from the very beginning, and then have all these tens of thousands of people sitting in those types of buildings. This is Olympia Stadium in Berlin as well, where we did the full redevelopment, redesign for the World Cup in 2006, and that's absolutely fascinating. Another part which is always kind of scary is to see the real scale of stadiums when they start to be built. Because we are working in a digital world, we have all our plans and we have our screens and we have everything. But then once you go to construction sites and you see 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people building the things that you've been working on with a big team as well, but is always a very impressive moment. And the scale and the size and also the complexity, it's always a combination of many, many people working together, usually from all over the world. This is an image from the first stadium I worked on in the middle of the Amazon rainforest in Manaus. Manaus was host city, chosen by the Brazilian government to represent that really impressive Amazon rainforest. Manaus is 1,200 kilometers upriver. The steel structure was pre-assembled, was fabricated and pre-assembled in Portugal, put on a ship, and you can reach Manaus with an ocean-worthy ship. So the ship just deported from Portugal, went straight up to the Amazon rainforest, and then was assembled here. And this was the final result. The architecture here represents a basket that local Indian communities use to go into the forest and collect fruits, everything they needed. Of course, if the basket is the stadium, then the people inside are the fruit, but this is where the analogy ends. Today, I would like to introduce a little bit more on the stadium that is now under use. It's officially not inaugurated, but it's fully there, which is the Santiago Bernabéu Stadium in Real Madrid. And Real Madrid started as a very, very small club, more than 100 years ago, on the outskirts of Madrid. And as the club grew, so did the city. And then at some point, the stadium is now located on the main avenue, the financial district in Real Madrid. But the stadium did not have anymore the architectural feeling, the design that the club Real Madrid, who maybe objectively so is considered, they consider themselves as well one of the best clubs in the world. And the idea or the challenge for the design competition that we won was to design a stadium that is in line with the ambition of the club and that represents the club as one of the best clubs ever in history in football. So what we did is we kept the original structure, and through 4 lines that kind of almost like dance, or as a sort of football analogy, move as a ball around the stadium. We designed a new facade and a new roof on top of that building. Here you can see in red is the old system, the old stadium, more or less the outlines, and then this full new facade, this new element that kind of puts the stadium back into what we hope the next 100 years in the history of the club as a new icon. We worked on this together with 2 local architecture firms in Spain, and always all stadiums we do, it's never just us, it's always an interaction between many different firms and especially as well local architectures. And what we were able to do is not only transform the stadium but also transform the surroundings. So we were able to create public squares around 12,000 square meters, which doesn't sound a lot, but this is in the heart of Madrid, of new public spaces directly linked because of the redesign of the stadium that we did. And fascinating part about the facade design here is that due to local building regulations, we were not allowed to touch the ground. So everything that you saw in those images is hanging from structures, from 4 big towers and mega trusses that are then spanning around 250 by 300 meters from one side to the other. So on the left-hand side, you see more or less the 4 towers. Then there are around 100 vertical ribs that are hanging from those mega trusses. Then we have 38 lines of horizontal elements that go around that create this geometry. And these are then cladded with stainless steel aluminium panels that each have their own geometry. So this was, of course, all developed in 3D, all parameterized. And the interesting part, we worked very closely with the industry, and they use the same models for fabrication as that we have been developing for the design. Every panel is unique, so we have around 12,000 different panels. And these are they are the new identity of the stadium. So here 2 models. This is the old stadium on left, and on the right-hand side, everything that we've been wrapping around this and designing to bring the stadium up to the latest standards. Of course, we use all different kinds of technologies. This is a wind tunnel that we did to optimize the structure, to reduce, or to optimize really the amount of material that is used. And this is a close-up from the design documentation. So each of the louvers has two layers, let's say. One is facing slightly upwards, and one is facing slightly downwards. And that gives a really fantastic effect, because there's always one which is more illuminated than the other one. And this creates as well, this helps to establish this three-dimensional view around the stadium. During daytimes, the upper parts, they reflect the skies, and they actually really reflect the bluish tones or the beige tones of the buildings. And the lower parts are darker. And at night, when the city lights up, the lower part lights up more, reflects more, and the upper part becomes darker. These were some early test models. Again, during the design, working closely together with the industry. This is a young me there standing. Oh, yeah. And you can see as well here the curvature. So there's 3 curves on each of these individual elements. They span more or less 4 meters, and they vary in height. Sometimes 60 meter high, sometimes 1.20 meters. And this creates actually 2 different types of spaces that are added to the stadium, which the club didn't have before. One is a space in between the old concrete structure with the tiers and this new element, which we use for bars, for lounges, for skyboxes. There is a museum inside that is part of the tour. There is a shopping mall inside, and all of these elements are directly related to the space that the stadium occupies in relation to the city. So the museum is on the main entrance side, which is here, Castellana. The shopping mall is on the back side, where the old shopping mall used to be, etc. The second space, which is very fascinating, is this sort of slit, which you see running on top. And this is what we call the skywalk. And this will be part of the stadium tours, and also different kinds of events can be held there. And you have actually, I was there recently, you have a fantastic view over the city, because it's really, really high up. You can also see the pitch, so it's a very fascinating space, which now the club is using actively. This is an image during the early design stages of how this space between the new facade and the old building can be used for different types of elements. Fascinating, very nice construction picture, because you can see we needed to rebuild 2 of the towers. The stadium already had 4 towers, but the ones here on the front side were in the wrong position to receive the mega trusses. You can see as well, as the city is so close by, construction was extremely complicated. So trusses needed to be pre-assembled. They were built as bridges, segment by segment, because you could not just get with huge cranes from outside. So you needed to build. The construction challenge was massive. And you see the mega trusses, which are supporting, let's say, the hanging structures of the facade, the museum, etc. Also during construction, this picture, so you can really see the old and the new. The new facade as well acts as a sort of climate barrier. We protect the inside from sun. We protect it. It works as a sort of louver facade, so there's natural ventilation as well coming through. And it also defines the aesthetics directly, both from the outside as well as from the inside. Again, each individual louver is a singular piece. They were all prefabricated in the north of Spain. They came in sequence to construction site. So the level of precision needed to be absolutely accurate. And this is what we did together again with the industry, the construction firm, and everybody involved. Because there's no single element the same. So they needed to be there in time, accompanying the construction sequence. And the material is a stainless steel. It's a linen milled element, and this gives the tones, the different colors that the stadium has, is based on what the stadium reflects to a certain extent. So there was massive research done by our team to find the right material that had the right level of reflection, the right intensity, the right tone, and now seeing the stadium reflecting the city and kind of interacting in that way. Those louvers, they also are sometimes more open when there is a visual connection to the city. Sometimes they're more closed to protect either the stadium or the surroundings from each other. So they kind of create this display, but the color, the material, the texture was extremely important, and that's the whole design is based, let's say, on those premises. Of course, the best club in the world, the best stadium in the world. So we have a retractable roof, which can cover the pitch, and this also allows for other types of events. We thought they would use it more for concerts and for other types of events, but now they asked UEFA if they can close the roof because the sound inside gets just so much more intense. So for the most critical matches, they try to convince people to close the roof to support the team to win their matches. And here two types of technology. On the top you see the 360 LED screen. The height is between 6 meters and around 12 meters behind the goals. You have to, I don't have the video here because I don't have the rights to show it to you, but on YouTube you can see, and there are pushing dragons, and it's really fantastic. But on the bottom you can see the other innovation, and that was actually, to be really honest, not part of the planning, is the retractable pitch. As the retractable pitches are nothing new in stadium design. There are many stadiums design. Gelsenkirchen, Schalke has a retractable pitch. The interesting part here is there's no space to transport the pitch to. So what the club decided is to intersect the pitch in 7 segments, and they all go down in a around 40-meter deep underground parking level. And each pitch element, this spans around 100 meters because they couldn't use the short side because actually there's a metro running right below the field of play. So this is around 100 meters in length, what you see here. And every pitch element has the full infrastructure for the grass of the element below to grow. So there are grow lights, there's irrigation, there is ventilation. Ventilation is the most critical part for pitches to grow. And the philosophy, and it's actually true, is that grass in this condition, you can perfectly control the whole environment. If pitches are outside in stadiums, it's always very difficult because there's a lot of shadow, there's not a lot of sun, and you need to have grow lights and everything anyway. So the vision here, the idea is, let's make a greenhouse. I'm from the Netherlands, we grow tomatoes in greenhouses. I know that here in Germany, those tomatoes are not considered the best tasting ones, but they grow. So the idea is that you could use the same technology for the grass, and that's what they did. The stadium now is really a multifunctional arena. Before it was mainly football, now it's also host concerts. So Taylor Swift was there earlier this year. And this proposes as well, in general, to stadiums a very nice challenge because the public is completely different. If you have a football match, your average public has a certain demographic in a cross-section. If you invite Taylor Swift, the public is completely different. And you need to cater for that in terms of toilets, in terms of food and beverages, in terms of safety, access, etc., etc. So we were very happy to see that this is now really happening and taking place. And of course, for the club, this is also a great way to generate extra revenue. Closing my part for today. Again, as you very well mentioned, the most sustainable way of building is to not build. And this, I think, Real Madrid Stadium is one of those examples where the decision of the club to stay there, to stay on the holy ground which they have, to not get rid of the history of the club, to not get rid of everything they've been building up for so long, but instead to design, and with a very bold design, and we were very, of course, proud to have been part of this, but to foresee and to design an architecture that both reflects the ambitions of the club and the future of the club, but also respects the history and really the connection that the stadium has to the city is, of course, one of the most challenging tasks that we have as architecture, but also one of the most gratifying. So with that, I would like to thank you all very, very much.
Pleasure. A really nice presentation. Thank you very much. I was already thinking what I should say after your presentation. You used quite often the word fascinating. I would fully agree. And I'm not sure if you build a starship or an airport or just a stadium, because that's honestly mind-blowing. Because with the surrounding, within Madrid, the time, I think you were almost working for 10 years.
Yes.
Imagine 10 years to rebuild a stadium or to transform a stadium. So this means with the right architectural company office and with the right budget, it's possible. Wow. No, Sander, thank you very much. It was really, really nice. That was the first class. Yeah, Juergen, you're going to have a hard time now. Sorry for you. No stadium, but he will manage. So it's time now for Juergen to come up on the stage. Juergen Heinzel from UN Studio. He was... Juergen is my senior speaker. He's now here for the third time and makes me very happy to see you here again. When I tried to get hold on him last weekend, I was in kind of emergency because I heard nothing from him for weeks. He told me the hut is burning.
The roof is on fire.
The roof is on fire. So, you're busy.
Busy, yeah.
You're busy.
We all are, right?
We all are busy.
Yes.
But nevertheless, I'm really happy that you're here. You told me in the first run that you're going to present a small project, a medium project, and a large project. Mm-hmm. That is here on my agenda. Now you told me you skipped the order, and it's not a large project, it's a tall project, but the middle one is still the same, and you finished with the small one, which might make Uli quite happy because it's placed and based in the TU Delft. So stay tuned. So Juergen, your stage.
Yeah, I mean, this is also what you say in the Netherlands. You work from big to small, right? And it also reflects a little bit our mindset, how we usually develop ideas. I've been speaking about this earlier. I just looked it up. It was beginning to 2022. So I skipped one because I was not invited, Christian. but okay. Oh, yeah. So that was a slide I showed the last time when I was here. And what I said about this slide is that I was not wearing a hat because I was working for another company. Meanwhile, I returned to UN Studio, so where I also started my professional career. And one thing that has not changed, I'm still Juergen, and you can still say you to me. I want to give a brief intro on UN Studio, who we are. I mean, we know GMP, we know Ramboll also for how big you actually are and the impact you can have. But sometimes I still need to explain a little bit how we tick and what we think. So we started in Amsterdam already in 1988. And then slowly we developed additional entities because we have a very global kind of mindset. I mean, the UN Studio means United Network Studio, meaning we work all over the world and also try to adapt, let's say, the local culture and the local ways of developing architecture. This means we are not only doing architecture anymore, we have a more comprehensive service offering from our side. Of course, architecture is still our core business, but I mean, we reach out to really from urbanism to more exotic kind of disciplines like futures, where we really try to anticipate more actively what will be the forces in the future. Where we come from, this is one of our first projects from the beginning of the 90s, when our founder, Ben van Berkel, was commissioned with a bridge for Rotterdam, the Erasmus Bridge, one of our signature structures, I would say, something that really became a connecting element. And this is also really what we like to do, connect people, connect cities with each other, but also mobilize. So we have a very strong foot in infrastructure, but we also really like the crafty things, so really the design things, but also really thinking about entire city developments. We always think about how can you really bring people there to new destinations, and I'm going to be talking about this one at the end, because I changed the order. But yeah, I will get to that. So sustainability is really something with a focus on the user and the human beings using the building that has really by far the highest priority for the design thinking. Thinking about life cycle of buildings and what buildings can mean in the future, we always try to anticipate also what is the legacy looking back. How is the future looking at us being here today? I mean, we have seen already some examples when you extend the lifespan of a stadium by so many years, but seriously, if we discuss a lifespan of 20 years for a building, that's quite ridiculous, actually. So there have been, in some time, some mistakes made, which we now try to avoid, of course. So we think in these kind of very healthy, smart neighborhoods. So how can we really bring things together? How can we share the knowledge and benefit of this all together? So really focusing on communities and also looking in other possibilities out of the box. But what is very important for us, I think I have been showing this image before. It's not about that we like people to have our buildings as tattoos under their skin. But this is a very nice anecdote, which brings me back to the very, very first project, the Erasmus Bridge, where you have this captain, every time he comes back to Rotterdam and he passes underneath that bridge, he knows he's at home. So, and this was so valuable for him that he gave himself that tattoo. And I think it's the biggest compliment you can receive as an architect when you really establish that identity and that emotional connection. So, what am I going to show today? I brought 3 projects, the tall one, the large one, which is a large inner city development for Amsterdam, the Booking.com campus, and last but not least, the small one, which is no, it's 10,000 at the TU Delft, our Echo project. So my Portuguese is really bad, Sander, so maybe you want to correct me, but it's called Parque da Cidade. I don't know if that's okay, but let's call it PDC for now. Maybe that's easier. So why I brought this, because Christian asked me to bring really the fresh projects that have been constructed. So we have delivered this this year, basically. And just to briefly go back, what all these projects have in common is actually those are all Corona projects, which is also something interesting because it gave us additional challenges, of course, to get it there, and not just us, of course, also our clients and the whole team around, which is also something we should never forget. Also, as architects, it takes more than an architect to make buildings, actually. So it's a residential project in Sao Paulo. It's about 82,000 square meter, whereby with 2 high-rises, whereby the amenity level which is introduced in this development is about 30%. So 30% of the overall area is dedicated to private, semi-private and public amenities, meaning what you, Lars, have introduced on the HSBC tower. This is something we already try to implement into this typology, because it's right if you think about a high-rise in a very conventional, traditional typology, it comes with certain challenges in the way how people are now using it, living in there, working in there. So it shows also in your example that this is really something needed. You need to provide areas which are not just bringing the profit in, but also contributing to the, let's say, social cohesion, to the neighborhood feeling, and so forth. So there is a big focus on this. But also the way how it's integrated into the urban context, the public amenities. How can you really connect to the tissue around these buildings? Because every building is one small part of something bigger, or something in the sense of how we live together. So conventionally, there was a unit type mix, which was if you would just extrude it. It would kind of build or generate probably like every second high-rise would be looking in Sao Paulo. So there's this particular mix of units that we in the next step try to kind of twist around, so to almost kind of develop equal qualities for the different unit types. And then we had this kind of nudge move where we take things apart and we establish that these kind of special amenity areas for the residents. The trick hereby is something that we have already learned, I think, 15, 20 years ago. Christian Bergmann will remember that when I started at UN Studio, I had the pleasure to work together with Christian on a development in Singapore. Which kind of had a similar logic integrated into this. What does it do? It's quite simple. You kind of the way you spin the apartment blocks around the core, which every high-rise obviously needs. The way you distance it, you orient the apartment types. You can get quite some benefits out of this. Meaning, of course, you have more, let's say, more equal ways of enjoying the view from your apartment, but also, especially in these kind of warmer areas of our planet, you have the possibility to allow for natural ventilation going through, compared to the left side, where you always have a back side of your apartments, where you don't have any windows, you don't have any kind of way of getting air in. So if you see that this also from the diagram, how it manifests into the kind of constructed structure, so it also has quite an impact how the tower is also articulated. To zoom in on these kind of, let's say, semi-private public balconies, this is really where additional functions for the residents of the building are integrated. So it builds this kind of little neighborhood plaza, or a place where you can celebrate the birthday of your kids. And so it's an amenity that is something really contributing to the typology of high-rise in terms of residential use. Then important, like with a pizza, if you bake a pizza, the dough is not good, then you can forget about the pizza. It doesn't matter what you put on top of it. It's the same with, if you think about these developments, high-rise, you need to think about how does it embed, what is the access, the additional use, is it public, private? So there is this park which is kind of pulled into the site development, and it, sorry to be so fast, but it builds the kind of it references a sort of a public landscape that is thought as kind of pavilions in the park. The view from below, also to just give you another view on the quality from the sky launches. Getting back to building the strong community. So this is where we really see, okay, there is a horizontal integration of the high-rise into of this development into the context, but it also has a third dimension, which is then connected to the sky lobbies or the sky launches that are on the other level. So just a view down onto the podium. So there is this kind of connecting, linking element, which is housing all the public and private amenities. I mean, think of yoga, spa, wellness, sports activities, but also a lot of landscape and green features, because you have to know, maybe Sander can confirm that, but in Sao Paulo there is, or generally in Brazil, there is a strong need for outdoor living, outdoor enjoying, meeting, cooking, and anything you can imagine. So that was quite important. For the design, we have something we always try to implement. is it's not like that you throw technology on it and this will solve your problems, but first you start from very passive kind of design strategies. Of course, we pushed on that kind of greenification around the site. So really, I mean, in Germany, you mostly have the conversation about whether you need to cut an old tree away if you want to build something new. I mean, here it was more about how much more green can you actually bring onto the site. There's high comfort level. And also when it comes to the kind of the benefits of the way we have layouted the apartment types, there's a lot of space allocated with deep balconies, big balconies. So every individual user has their own balcony. Then they can go to a common shared balcony, but they can also enjoy the landscape. So this idea of outdoor living is something deeply embedded into the design. Natural daylight, of course, very important. I showed you there's no backside, so you can enjoy this all the way around. And so there's generally a very permeable way how we have designed it and structured it. There was a very strong focus. I mean, it's always also very depending on your client in how far you can really push on these topics. This was a very good client in a way that they were really supporting also a very sustainable approach. Starting from the embodied footprint, the way the cement, the concrete was mixed was a very hybridized way. There is local sourcing, there is renewable energies, the way how it's been dealt with construction waste, and last but not least, what is something that is, of course, very, very complex if you think about supply chains, is like that there was really material sourcing done 100% all the way to where it comes from. So we were quite aware of where the material that we have been using, where they come from. So also on operational, because this is always something we need to, of course, consider. It's not just you put something there and you have you look at your most minimal use of generation of CO2. You also need to think beyond that in, okay, how much across a lifespan of so many years, what you can really do about the operational aspect. I mean, there are many different aspects what you can do. I think we hit really good numbers here in a way of how we can reduce the energy, but also simple things like water savings. I mean, we also know the scarcity of that very essential element. So all in all, very good metrics for something that we developed in Sao Paulo. So we were quite happy with our first project actually in South America in this also in this condition, in this framework with that client, that it took just a little 10 years to get here, but again also through Corona, and we delivered it this year and everybody is very happy about it. I will move to the next one, which is my large size building, which is the Booking.com campus in Amsterdam, central Amsterdam. Booking.com is located in on the Oosterdoks Island, really in the center of Amsterdam. So up here, you actually have the central station, and this is an image from the 70s, I think, where it still has been used as the mail distribution center of Amsterdam. It's called Postzees. In 2005, it looked like this. So you can also see in the back the central station. So it was really like flattened out. I think at that time, the old post distribution center, which is on the next image, which probably the people who have been visiting Amsterdam around that time, was really an institutional building because it was also housing the Stedelijk Museum. There was the very popular Club 11 on the 11th floor, and there were very many creative people working in here. So it kind of had a really in the development of the Amsterdammer inner city, it had really a special meaning. because also at that time I arrived in Amsterdam, so it was really good to observe that. So now we, somewhere around 2016, this would be the image. So already most part was built, but there was the final slot was still missing, which was very long time. There was not really. Several people were interested to kind of invest into that or look into this. There was a very exclusive ground position from BPD, which is actually a housing or residential developer, and they kind of got together with Booking.com and kind of developing this inner city campus here, because you need to know Booking.com is actually a Dutch company. It's one of those typical tech startups from, I think, 2005 around, and it comes from a normal garage. How we all know these stories, but even I think in 2008 it was sold to the American Price Group, and then it became like what we or how we know it today. The tricky bit about Booking in Amsterdam is that they were occupying like about 12 buildings across the city, with around 8,000 employees. So it's a very, very large employer in Amsterdam. And they came with this kind of, okay, we wanna stay in Amsterdam, dear city of Amsterdam. Where can we consolidate? Where can we come together? I mean, now they have already grown out of this again, but we managed to kind of secure this this project for us by participating in a competition, and that was the start of something I have not experienced until that point in the way, because we were very early at the table, and we were able to really kind of get to know Booking.com and try to understand, okay, what we need to be developing for them. So one thing was, of course, because it's so central, Booking has the policy, we don't like to go with a car to our office. We don't like to come from far or need to go out to the countryside. So we don't want to be outside somewhere. We want to be right in the middle. Most of our employees come to the central station by public transport, and then they want to get there. So they needed something really central, something really big. Like a destination, a new destination for them. Then, of course, the ambition to create something that is very much kind of top-notch on work environment. How can we bring all these kind of different cultures and their employees together? So with how can we connect it and also make it one of the most sustainable developments? So how we started this, we first needed to understand their spirit. So Booking themselves, they kind of created a spirit team, which is something I also have not experienced until then. But this was really about like understanding themselves and getting into a dialogue with an architect to understand and kind of build a framework around what they really would need for the future. I mean, we heard a lot, we don't know what we need in 5 to 10 years, we don't know this, we don't know that. So it was really a long dialogue process, super interesting. And then in the next step, we have translated this to actually very tangible kind of ingredients that we can apply on architectural level. So it's this kind of all-connecting building that we always imagined. And if you look at this spot where we built about 72,000 square meter above ground for about 3,500 to 4,000 employees, it's a massive, dense development. So we need to find a way, if you pack all this on site, how can we really also break this open? And we have introduced 2 big atria whereby the working floors are 80 meter deep or 20 meter, if I'm not sure anymore. But there's a lot that needs to be packed into that. But you can see how it kind of connects through these atria. So Booking is a very vibrant company. They have many different cultures. So it needed to do everything without being gadgety in a way. So not this kind of foosball table and the climbing wall. They also got a climbing wall, but you know, we really needed to dig deep. What was the main focus for us was really the kind of three aspects of health. We always talk about psychological health, the social health that you experience in a work environment, and the physical health, of course. So there was a very clear ambition that it needs to be kind of the most healthy and the most healthy work environment. And I would just like to go along a couple of aspects so you understand how we have translated this into architecture. So think really about these kind of different aspects that would impact your condition as an employee or as a user of the building. So when we, for example, it was a lot about the human experience, thinking about the community, departing from this kind of spirit that booking wants to live in their new environment, but also thinking about physical movement. And then daylight, very important with the density. How can we really kind of break things open? How can we connect things? Not that people disappear in a core to take the elevator, but how can we stimulate really this kind of community aspect that people meet and they even work in the open space and enjoy it. So movement, very important. Daylight. But also the biophilic approach. I think there are more than 10,000 plants integrated into the building. So it's really true green. It's not something made from plastic. So it also really contributes because everybody knows just the presence of green is really already increasing your ability, the way you produce and do work. But also on the technical side, I mean, all that aside, it's nice to talk about culture, spirit, and this, but you also need to make a building, which also came with sky-high requirements, thinking about also the location of the building. I mean, I was mainly responsible back then to develop the different facade types on this, and one of the main challenge was, okay, do we need triple or quadruple glazing in order to fulfill the acoustic requirements? But there was, of course, much more to it, and it's an integral system that you need to bring all the loose ends together. So there is a high thermal comfort because the whole system is water-based. You can see this kind of very open ceilings where you also have the radiators integrated. The funny thing is something you cannot really do in Germany. We have the entire building equipped with a plenum ventilation system. So there are no ventilation ducts in the ceiling here. The entire floor is one big duct. And then you have these kind of openings, which you see more often on all the pictures, where the air is basically brought into from the floor. So the fresh air comes from the bottom up. I get to this because in the next building it's also integrated like that. Just to wrap that up. So really, the biophilic approach and this kind of the bridges, working balconies, everything that kind of really stimulates. Okay, you cannot hide away. You are in the open, and people really enjoy this aspect. This was really nice because this was a big part of our team. Actually, all of them who also have contributed to this building. And then I spoke to the responsible person if they have an overview of how many people actually are needed to work on a building like this. He said to me that about over 10,000 people have been contributing to the design and also the construction and the process of this building. So quickly, vision and reality. I think we did quite well. There's also a residential part to it because it's BPD. They needed to also have their 42 residential units. Let me just skip to that. And this would be the view from the east view where we have a very intricate kind of facade also. I have to say the facade is an element facade which has some special corners. I mean, we have been really sourcing this through many facade suppliers. So we ended up with Permacelisa. Scheldebouw, who helped us to really develop this. But we also spoke to Schüko, and we spoke to Reiners, and so it was very interesting to also develop this on the go with the industry partners. So a true connector, kind of the final closing piece, amazing roof terraces, and they actually, I mean, as you see here, this volume is actually resembling the old Post-CS tower that I have been showing in the beginning, with the club and the Stedelijk Museum back then. And for some time we also have been discussing whether they want to have a public club on top, the new Club 11, because it has a great view, but they decided against it because they want to use it all for themselves. So anyway. So last but not least, I want to move to the small building of 10,000 square meter, which probably Uli knows quite well, which is also a building which also is standing for a really, really interesting learning process. Because if you work with an architectural faculty, you have to deal with a lot of expectations when you receive a design brief. So if you would have just read the brief and the performance, everything the building should have been doing, it would basically be a shoebox with the windows small like this. What we came up with looks like this. So, and there's a story behind it. The way we really have challenged the requirements and also the sustainability criteria, how we have turned them upside down, if you look at it from the point of the user. So what do you really want to achieve for the students using this building? So it's a kind of 3-story building with a central atrium, central entrance. There are various functions in there, mainly also study space, but also big flexible lecture halls, or one big lecture hall that you can subdivide also. So it's this kind of interdisciplinary building where several faculties can make use of it. And I mean, Uli, you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the students very much enjoy this building. Okay, thumbs up. Here a quick 3D visualization of, let's say, the ground floor area. You can see the central entrance and the way it's been structured with the different study spaces around. So what is quite important is this kind of central gesture, which we always like, not just for making a grand gesture, but it also helps in the way how the building is climatized. So there's a climate buffer space in here. And then we, of course, have the opportunity to build a nice staircase into this. And it's something that is it is a very generous gesture, but also again a space for movement, a space for meeting, and so forth. So here another visual of that. The lecture hall in itself is a kind of a radial. It's kind of a half circle layout, which is really also you can separate it, but. One thing that is really striking in this building is, of course, the amount of glass that we were able to wrap around. And we spent really a lot of time developing this because our main focus was like to bring as much daylight into the building for the students to enjoy. So big focus on the envelope. How can we integrate green? So you see the building, the users are very much sitting in their own context, which was a very essential aspect, but also really getting into kind of the engineering of the frameless glass. How can we really do this? So also this is something where our heart really starts beating when we have the opportunity to do something like this. So you see, there's a big influence on the building provided by the context because of the visibility, the transparency. But the way we kind of then also got the performance right was, of course, by implementing a lot of, or spending a lot of time, how can we really make this the most sustainable building as well? So there's a lot of PV integrated on the roof, as you can see on this image, but it also has a very smart building skin. There's a geothermal storage of heat and cold, something that is also much easier to implement in the Netherlands than getting permitted in Germany. And so bottom line is that the building actually produces more energy than it uses, so which is a was for us back then really a major achievement, departing from that initial brief. So what does it do on a structural ability? There are, of course, let's say the facade and the energy roof and what it does, but also the way the primary structure is laid out. We have been working together with Arab, with Matthew on this. So it's really this kind of integrated approach of assembly. It's a steel structure with big frames that you can, at some point in time, hopefully take apart and move somewhere else or do something with it. And what does it do on kind of technical level? I mean, I showed it before. We always try to have more passive strategies first, but then also really dive deep on technical innovation and how can we really kind of push this to the next level. So I have been explaining already the ductless system in the floor plenum on the booking.com project, which we also applied here. So again, no ducting whatsoever. You can just take that container for air supply, take it from here, put it somewhere else, or you need to have a meeting room, you need to do something. So it offers a lot of flexibility. The atrium is this buffer space. There's a balanced heating cooling system, so it's not just that it's constantly kind of using the full energy and so forth. On the envelope, we have this kind of integrated strings, which are supposed to provide green also growing on the building itself. You can see this kind of deeper cantilevering floor edges, which also provide sort of shading or reduce the heat gain. So all in all, a couple of very simple ingredients that really help to make this one of the most sustainable buildings so far that we were able to produce. And this is one of the last slides, then I will also be done. This is again getting to the principle of the duct ventilation. You need to imagine it that the floor is a duct, and then the air is being pushed in, meaning the clean air is the closest to the user. Usually you throw in air from the top, where it mixes with, let's say, polluted, dirty air in your direct proximity. In this way, the air is then extracted from the ceiling, so there is this kind of natural flow of air coming up. So this would also really provide very healthy air because it's one of the most difficult things to tackle is air quality indoors. If you speak to companies who develop like filter systems for indoor air, this is one of the biggest challenge. So I think it's of course challenging on the implementation, and in Germany you would not get this through the regulation. So I'm very happy that this in the Netherlands we were already able to apply to 2 buildings as a principle. The whole building is, or not the whole building, but large portions of the building is also circular. So thinking along in this kind of the idea of the disassembly, but also bringing in recycled products. So it's demountable, but there's a lot of bio-based and recycled material properties. So what does it do? Because we always try to have this additional purpose, the additional value developed into our buildings. The interdisciplinarity, which it represents as a building at campus, is also something that is very much integrated into the design process. So you need to work very interdisciplinarily to get to such results. It's a very healthy building. It's sustainable, but it also offers the right flexibility. So not in 30 years we need to be thinking about the users cannot occupy this. They will move somewhere else because it's not usable for them anymore. It's transparent, and therefore we also believe it's much more future-proof than many other buildings. So thank you very much.
Wow. Impressive. And to be honest, it's your own fault that you are third time here, because it's really,
Okay.
really nice.
No, I run out of ammunition.
Yeah.
We need to build more projects.
Yeah, come on, 10 years. Wow,
Yeah.
that's a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow, impressive, honestly, yeah. Especially when you explain the idea, the flooring, the air pollution, all this stuff. It is not only architecture. I think there's a lot of brain work behind here.
Absolutely.
Yeah, no, great. You mentioned Booking.com, that you do kind of touring on a regular basis, and now I know why you do this, because I think we are all kind of jealous not working in such an office. Yeah. Boah.
I would love to work there.
Yeah.
I mean, every time I go, and we have a long queue of people who really want to see
so
that.
I think we have 50 here now.
We also queuing ourselves,
Yeah.
because they also need to do some work at some time and not just tour us
really,
around.
Really nice.
Yeah.
Oh, Juergen, thank you very much.
Thank you.
It was a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you.
Christian, showtime. Our plant number one, last but not least. Pleasure to have you here.
My pleasure.
You are touring quite a lot at the moment, being on a stage last week in Munich, now in Frankfurt. Next week?
I think Munich was 2 weeks ago. No?
2 weeks ago already. You know where you are next week?
No idea.
No. Christian Bergmann from Hadi Teherani. When I think about Hadi Teherani, I have a keyword in mind, and that is iconic. And that is really something, you get a lot of awards within the last couple months and years for iconic buildings. You will present the Deutschlandhaus, which is a pretty German word. And another German word is Innovationsbogen. The Deutschlandhaus is located in Hamburg. That's your latest project? Yeah. And he will talk about the Innovationsbogen, which is in Augsburg. And maybe not everybody knows where Augsburg is. It's near Ulm. Oops. One remark to the Innovationsbogen. I think you're going to mention it, but we from Vicona are very proud of the Innovationsbogen, because it is our first worldwide project with 100% recycled end-of-life aluminium facade.
Now you spoiled my...
Yeah, I know. But I'm paid for this, so... it's called Hydrocecal 100R, and yeah, I think we are all very proud, Walterbau, for building this Innovationsbogen, you as architects, and we as the industry. So, but now the stage is yours, Christian.
Well, thank you very much. That would have been the climax of my entire talk tonight. You were talking about iconic buildings. I would rather put it like that, or maybe with I'd start with a quote from Hadi Teherani, which is that we are really seeing urbanism, architecture, interior design, and product design as something atmospherically inseparable. So what do we mean by this? We mean that we really have the ambition of taking care of everything that surrounds us as human beings. Because in the end, this makes our day. I think it's all, every day. I mean, I was traveling today for 6 hours, I think, from Hamburg to Frankfurt, which usually takes 45 minutes. But anyhow, anywhere where you are, anything that you surround yourself with just changes the way you feel and changes also your ambitions and your interactions. Talking about offices, for example, it changes the way you interact, it changes the way you might be innovative or not, and so on and so forth. So this is a guideline which you can find in all of our work, no matter whether it's in architecture, urbanism, interior design, or product design. And this is how we surround ourselves every day in our headquarters in Hamburg with everything that we do on our own. So building itself is one of the very early works by Hadi Teherani himself. Now just became a listed monument in Hamburg. It's 27 years old. But everything else that you see as well is from our office. So as I mentioned, all of these fields are, of course, intersected and all come together. We're also taking care, of course, of sustainability topics far more than only thinking about building, but also thinking about energy topics, regenerative solutions for energy with our company, Hadi Teherani Solar, and our offices. This is how it all started. That's 35 years ago when Hadi Teherani himself opened his own architectural studio, which is on the first floor. But on the ground floor, he started with a fashion boutique. So he imported fabrics, and he was really thinking about the way, or about how to improve men's wear, fashion wear. And I always like to start my talks with this image because it's really something that we still, as I mentioned, taking care of all of these disciplines, are trying to do every day today. So whenever we design a building, we also think about how does it feel, how does it touch, what's the door handle gonna be like when you touch it, how do you really think of all the small little details, and especially when we talk about facades today, how do you have not only the big concept in mind from the very iconic idea maybe of a building and of the way you see it and it's going to be situated in the city fabric, but also on how it's going to be in the very, very detail on the facade, for example. So that's why we call, or what we think of when we look at a site, that we say we want to have this tailor-made project, like a suit that we would wish to have tailor-made for ourselves. We also want to have this tailor-made idea and the tailor-made project for each site and for each client and for each city and for the public. So I'm just starting off with, I think, 3 or 4 examples to showcase our work. This is, I have the pleasure of watching this every day from our office. This is one of our iconic buildings, the so-called Dockland in the city, or in the harbor of Hamburg. And it's not only twisted or moved sidewards, because it should kind of like resemble the site that it stands on, looking a little bit like a very futuristic ship, even though it's already also almost 20 years old. But the foremost reason was that there was no site and the city wanted to prevent somebody to build a private building on that plot. So the idea was, we make something much better. We create a public plaza, a public platform, so everybody can walk up. It's really public. All of the tourists come there. People are, I'm seeing them every evening, gathering there for their workouts, running up and down. I think they are connected by docfit.com or something like this. So I think that's what architecture is also about, that people are interacting, they really enjoy it, and that you are creating a space where before there was no actual space happening. And talking about designing, product design, this is also one of our most iconic products, probably. Another project which also plays with the site and the heritage of the site are the so-called crane houses. Lots of our projects have a name which resembles or comes from our ideas of how to design them. The innovation arc also is something like this. So this is a former industrial area in Cologne, Germany, where you had the cranes, of course, of the harbor standing. Now they are not there anymore, but for the future, even if you're creating housing and offices over there, our idea was to create also houses which look like cranes, but they do much more than this, because they create a different level of the city and they also remain the city underneath. There is a really beautiful promenade underneath for pedestrians, and also the listed projects underneath could stay and also add to the value of the space. And another chair, which is maybe the furthest away from the silver chair that I showed earlier, is a 3D printed chair, which we developed during the last couple of years and was presented last year in Milan, which is a 3D printed chair, which not only helps us designing different geometries, but there is a much deeper story behind it, because once you're able to create something by 3D printing, you can get rid of all of the manufacturing processes that usually the companies need before you get a silver chair. It takes lots of millions in order to develop all of the tools to really create it. Then you need a certain mass amount to sell it. Then you start to ship it and all other kind of topics. With this, we have a fully recyclable bioplastic material. You only have the data. You can send the data out to wherever you want in the world. You can print it. It takes still 30 hours right now, but it's going to be less in the future. You don't have any CO2 emitted by any transport, and you don't need any manufacturing tools and so on. So the thinking behind it is much more. Having done this parametrically, the next step is also to adjust the parameters according to your body mass index, so that the material that you use is different an amount according to your weight and your height and these kind of topics. And the last project I'm going to show before I dive into the topic of today is our project Atmosphere. I was talking about atmosphere already, so this is really a nice atmosphere that we created close to Salzburg in the Austrian Alps, where we created a 5-star luxury spa for an already existing hotel in the neighborhood. What you see in the foreground is a relatively recent image where they have the first snow. So the 50-meter Olympic-sized pool is integrated into a natural swimming lake. Here it's frozen and the first snow was on it. So that's one of those. Today I'm going to talk about 2 projects. Christian mentioned it, the Deutschlandhaus in the really heart of Hamburg, which you see here, and the Innovation Arc in southern Germany. The Deutschlandhaus, the name is not given by us, or we also didn't come up with it. But here you can see it. It's pretty simple. It was a branding which was developed in 1929 by the developers of the original Deutschlandhaus, which was erected at the time. It's really in the city center of Hamburg. Everything around, you have to imagine, is in red brickwork. And there is this really nice typology, which we call Kontorhäuser in Germany, or in Hamburg especially, which is office buildings, but they add much more than simply being an office building. Because they usually have really great atrium. They are really publicly organized, and they have such an impact in terms of architecture and in terms of their use that each and every neighborhood somehow has a Kontorhaus, and you can orientate yourself through Hamburg by looking at those Kontorhauses. So this one is special because it's not one of those traditional Kontorhäuser, but it was really one which took up the ideas of international style and modernism, 1929 when it was erected, and it was one which used these ideas of modernism and brought it to Hamburg and to the red brickwork architecture. So instead of orientating the facade vertically, the horizontals are really important in this building. You have to imagine now that today we are all trying to get the bicycles into the city again and the cars out of the city. At that time, the city decided to make all of the streets much wider to get the traffic inside finally. Everything was speeding up, so they rounded off the corners. They wanted to show the dynamic of the city with those round corners. And it also has a couple of setback floors. So unfortunately, it didn't survive fully the war. There were quite some bomb attacks on it, and then further on also there were lots of different restoration and different changes in the project, especially in the 70s and 80s. So what we found out when we started with the competition, or what we saw is that the building didn't have the same quality as the original one anymore. So there was a huge debate, of course. Some wanted to keep it, some didn't, and everything. In the end, the architectural competition was started with the fact already that it had to go. So they wanted to demolish it, and they were looking for the best answer, how to treat this history of the spot. It's right at the Gänsemarkt, so from this shot you see from the Gänsemarkt. There's a very important building on the left and on the right, and it had to fit, and we wanted to find also a way that everybody in the end, all of the public and everybody would be happy with the new building. But still, of course, designing a new one, giving it our architectural ideas, and developing a mixed-use project with mostly offices, with commercial, of course, with restaurants, and also with some residentials in it. So what did we do? First of all, there was a given that it had to be red brickwork. It's our first red brickwork building, so we as Hadi Teherani wanted to find our own answer on how to treat it. Then we needed to keep the round corners and the setbacks. Those were the really important 3 topics. And we looked at the history, we did a really huge research on it, on the developments, and we developed a contemporary architecture which still, of course, has something to do with the location and with the historic building before. So we took up the idea of having really strong horizontals, but we added the verticals, making them more important. And we wanted to have a very abstract building, which is really playing with the red brickwork and with glass, and that's about it. So no further details to be seen. So the next step was that we invented a couple of small little details in the facade, talking about the tailor-made and the design topics. First of all, we used a handmade brick from Denmark, which is very long. Some of you might know them. It's called the Columba brick, which was used originally in Cologne and invented by the architect Peter Zumthor. But we wanted to arrange it vertically in order to give it a new look and not just continue with the horizontals. As the last 7 years showed, that was quite a topic to work on, how to arrange this vertically. And also then we wanted to decrease the amount of stone when we are going from the bottom to the top, and we wanted to increase the amount of glass the further you get to the sky. So gradually every horizontal from floor to floor becomes a little bit more narrow, and also all of the verticals are minimizing towards the top. And how did we do this? We did this by using always, or taking off always, one stone from each side. So what we ended up with is with a pretty complex issue on how to design a building which is really not rectangular or anything like this, with a typical office grid of 1.35 meters, which you need to have in the inside to have really flexible spaces, but also with a stone and with a gap between the stones which is fixed by 40mm stone. So, and then you didn't want to have anything cut or anything weird or strange on it, so we used parametric models to design all this. I'll show you a bit more about it later. This is when you enter. You're going up to the first floor. We used the entire ground floor for public functions and retail, of course, to activate the city centers. You're being welcomed by some water, which comes from the atrium. You go up to the first floor, and then you end up in the atrium, which is what we usually do to the outside. So we used the contemporary modern architecture on the inside to create this atrium, which on the one hand has something to do with this typology of Kontorhäuser, and on the other hand it creates this great public space on the one hand, but also of course the contemporary working environment for everybody working in the offices. So that was one of the reasons, I think, how we were able to create this building on the plot, and also how to win the competition in the end. What we did is, if you imagine that the outside is almost a rectangle, we started to play with courtyards, of course, as you usually do, and in the end we ended up that the most efficient way of doing it would be to create an ellipsis on the inside. Because like this, you're creating deeper spaces on four corners, and you can integrate very nicely the cores and all of the areas which don't necessarily need to have daylight. So we were able to integrate this into the four corners and create the ellipsis on the inside. This is how the floor plans look. On the left one, you see that it's a very efficient and also flexible way of renting out the spaces. You always have about 400 square meter big units per core, and you can connect all of them, and you can have a nice circulation area all around. But you're also able to have up to 9 different tenants per floor, so that all of the flexibility for the next decades to come, and also for renting or lending out spaces would be there. So a quick dive through our parametric models, how to organize this. You see those 4 shear walls, which also are the separation of the units, and the fire protection walls, then the setbacks from the outside. And the setbacks from the outside, of course, creates certain issues on the inside, because you want to have perfect, flexible, nice working spaces, but the floor plans always become more narrow and more narrow to the inside. And that's how we started to design that the atrium is not only just an ellipsis going boring all the way up, but the atrium basically in section does the same thing. As the building facade on the outside is setting back, we are cantilevering the atrium to the inside. And you see when you looked up during the construction site that you're starting with a 52-meter wide ellipsis on the first floor, and you're ending with a 32-meter perfect circle on the top. So you see that none of these ellipses is the same. They all seem to be moving against each other. We are creating internal balconies which are up to 3 meters deep, sometimes only 50 centimeters, in order to still be able to clean the glass. That's an early section. And of course, during the competition already, we were thinking about how to design it in a way that it's so strong that it lasts even through all of the debating, all of the cost topics and so on. You see an overlay of all of the different facades on the inside. This is another overlay where you see with the red dots the actual facade on the inside, and with the blue line on the same floor, the balcony outline. So we came up with these facade elements which are plain, which are straight, but then they are, because we are at the fish market, our office, so they almost look like a fish skin, they are turning around. And that was a design feature, then going into detail with our consultants, which made us really have a strong design which even adds to the atmosphere of the space, but which makes it possible that we were able to create all of these different radius of all of the ellipses with one single element and one single opening door. So we have two different elements, but everything seems to be different. By the way, just because we wanted to add a little bit on top, on every second floor, the direction of this facade is changing. So once it's going to the left and to the right, to the left. So this is the little things that you notice when you're there. That's a view up. This was the day when the palm trees were brought there. They spent some time in the Netherlands also in between. They're from Valencia originally, spent 1 year in the Netherlands, and from there were transported. They were taken by a big crane, mobile crane, on top of the building. And the reason why I was showing this image is also because roughly 5 years earlier we had to design the roof, of course, and we had to decide the size of the steel structure. And it had to be done in a way that, in the end, we did 3 meters, in a way that you were able to get the roots of each palm tree perfectly from the top through these elements. So, talking about the facade, this was the internal atrium facade, and on the outside, we worked with these vertical handmade stones. We have the setbacks floors. We went through, I don't know how many, but lots of mock-ups, lots of discussions with the city officials as well, one-to-one mock-ups. We wanted the corner to be perfect. We wanted, of course, the upstand and the downstand perfect. We didn't want to have any joints anywhere, so there were form pieces going around the corners. And we also parametrically designed a pattern which makes it look like it's not designed, but arbitrary. But of course, you have to design it in a way so that you can really manufacture it also economically. That's one of the mock-ups we did. And in the end, it turned out that there is no rule in Germany where you're able to place those kind of stones vertically on top of each other. None of the rules would have worked, so we went for a prefabricated concrete element, and we were placing the full bricks into the concrete elements. So it's not the thin ones, but it's real bricks. And this is a couple of examples, because we also didn't want the joints to be seen anywhere. So the vertical alignment is perfect when you want to go around the corners, and it's perfect to integrate all of the prefabricated concrete pieces and the joints in between, because still, even I was responsible for this project. I don't even see where they are right now, so they are really nicely integrated. So we didn't go for linear elements, but in the end it's concrete elements which also take up the corner or the junctions, let's say, the corners of the building. And these are some images I recently got. I was so happy to see these images from our manufacturer of the prefabricated concrete elements. They were building this kind of layout where they placed the stones in. and then simply pouring the concrete from the back. And because we wanted the sun and shadow to play a certain nice play on the facade in the end, we didn't want the mortar to be flush with the stones in the end, but we wanted the mortar to be 20 millimeters further back so that the handmade parts of the stones are really nicely shown. So you see that these wooden elements are exactly 20 millimeters high, so that when they took out the elements from these wooden elements, the element was already finished. So no mortar on site in the end. What you see in between the bricks is simply the concrete. I brought a small movie, and then we're jumping to the second project. Just because the atrium, I think, is nice to see in 3D moving. There's a nice rooftop terrace, by the way, overlooking the city center. This would have been a nice ending now, but I still have one. Another project, I think this is even more recently that we finished this one, at least the images I got last night, basically. That's in Augsburg. I always say close to Munich, but wherever. Augsburg, I think, is a destination for itself, especially what we did here is quite fascinating because they are really looking at innovation and how to improve and also have startups and innovative companies settling down in Augsburg. So what they are doing is to develop an innovation park. And we were lucky enough to be part of the competition for the very first project in this innovation park. I think our client alone has another 14 plots. So there's a lot of things going on. There's a Deutsche Luft- und Raumfahrtzentrum, Fraunhofer, and all of these people in Augsburg. And we were happy to decide the competition for us with the idea of this arc. It just doesn't come from nothing. The idea was you're entering the park and it's going slightly upwards, and there is a protected, nice green area in front. And this lawn we didn't want to totally disrupt, but we wanted to create something which plays with this lawn and with the greenery around it. So we simply wanted to bring the green on top of the building and shape the building by this idea. What happens at the same time is that the arch is going from east to west, so it's a perfect situation to integrate not only green on the roof, but also, as you see here, to integrate photovoltaics on the roof, because the efficiency, as you know, is always perfect when the sun rises on east and sets on the west and is the highest at noon. So this is another topic, and we wanted to integrate it into the design of the architecture, that we are not only placing those technical equipment topics on the roof, but you will see them from everywhere. So we took care of it in design. As you also see is that the arc is kind of cut apart in the middle and moved against each other. So one row of offices is basically connecting everything, and then you have two semi-arcs on each side, and in between you are able to create great rooftop terraces for everybody working there. And right in between, where you see on the right, between the cutoff part and the arc, there are the cores. So the cores are not inside of the project, but they are always related to the outside and to the facade. And anytime the elevator door opens, you're looking outwards, you have daylight, and you're also connected to the surrounding. So that's the section. Also, none of the building codes that were existing have been treated correctly by us. So I think we had about 12 exemptions from anything to get this through. But you see what kind of quality you create with the roof terraces also integrated there. And one of the reasons you mentioned at the climax of my whole talk is that we not only used all kind of, I don't think I have to name them, but all kind of technological aspects of a fully sustainable building. But also it's the first of its kind where we used an aluminum facade which is made out of 100% recycled aluminum. So it's not waste from any factory, but it's really end-of-life aluminum. So it used to be already, I don't know, a can or another facade maybe. But the great thing is that it doesn't have to look like it anymore. So I'm really a big fan of innovation in a way that we can design beautiful architecture, but tell the story about the sustainability behind it. It doesn't need to look directly like if you would have made it out of waste, but we have the industry and we have the technology and we have to continue being innovative to really being able to do this in a fully holistic way. You can also see that we wanted to create those verticals, giving the arc, I think you mentioned it very nicely with the Bernabeu, how the sun is going onto the kinked elements. We did it in a vertical way, and we also integrated a second layer so that it goes to this very perfect point to the top and then creates a triangle to the bottom. As you can imagine, if you want to have the perfect center on top, but you're following the arc, you're running into trouble because everything will end differently and you will have millions of different pieces and so on. So our initial idea, this is still very early from us, is that we might just follow the arc with the way that the prefabricated elements would be mounted on the building. It turned out it was a nice idea. Parts of it was also taken up, but the manufacturer, of course, in the end, had to use the horizontals to have the subconstruction and to put the elements on top. So in this way, we wanted to also have almost all of the same elements, but it was not a big issue in the end. It turned out to be 1,050 different elements per part to get this organized. This is the way they were bent in the factory. And then integrated on site. We have nice water features in front of the facade so that the building also continues and is being mirrored. Also, as I mentioned, when the doors of the elevators are opening, you have the direct view to the outside and you have the direct view over the water features, as you see in this image to the very end. And the entrances are also then emphasized by this. That's it. Thank you very much.
Now you know why I say iconic. Hey, so many details. Wow, the Deutschlandhaus. Peter Olbert was here, I think 4 or 5 years ago, he already mentioned the Deutschlandhaus. So how long have you been working on the Deutschlandhaus? Be honest.
I always, with this project, I always know this really well.
By your kids, wasn't this the story?
Yeah, because my first daughter is 7 now, and when she was in that night, that she was born, we were finishing the competition. So I was in the hospital at the time.
Okay.
So I know this very well.
Wow. Yeah, no, really, really nice. Thank you very much, Christian.
You're welcome.
Great effort, yeah. Yes, I'm very sorry. We are coming to the end. I want to thank you. I want to thank Marco Kessler and Media Shots for the technical video and photography. I want to thank Marco Reus and his communication agency, Respect. They're working behind. And I want to thank you to my speakers here. Wow, yeah. It was a pleasure, it was an honor to have you here. The insights and the inspiration, I think that's what I mentioned in the beginning, what one of the ideas of the next studio is, to be inspired. I think that was really inspiring. Your work, stadium, transforming, echo or booking, Christian with the Deutschlandhaus and the Innovationsbogen or Innovation Arc. Thank you very much. Thank you for joining live from wherever you are sitting in front of a screen. We continue now with the networking, and what I can do now is to invite you already now for next year. I would imagine same time of the year, late fall, for the 9th edition of the International Next Facade Summit. Thanks for joining. We are continuing now with the networking here at the bar, and thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Discover Next, the studio for facades and design. Next is the platform for innovation in the field of building envelopes, for inspiration, information, and communication. Initiated by Vicona, with leading industry experts as Next partners. Next is a unique concept which is constantly evolving and bringing the future of cities to life.